Thanks to our session sponsor, Build Equinox. Build Equinox featuring the new Serve 2 smart ventilation system. Unlike traditional ERVs or HRVs, it features many qualities of smarter balanced ventilation and feedback monitoring. With a standard ERV or HRV, you get a constant low airflow rate with no relation to actual indoor air quality or occupancy. For the first 3 days when the home is occupied during this study here, the quality is poor. The ERV just can't keep up. And when the occupants leave on vacation, the ERV keeps ventilating and wasting energy. But since the Serve actually monitors air quality, it ventilates only when it needs to. Compared to an ERV, the Serve can ventilate up to 300 CFM, quickly purging pollutants from the home. When no ventilation is needed, the Serve can recirculate and unify the home, providing some additional heating or cooling and dehumidification in a very energy efficient manner. The Serve does this by monitoring both CO2 and volatile organic compounds, or VOC levels, to determine when ventilation is necessary. Many gases are undetectable to the human nose, yet can cause significant impairment to health, cognition, sleep quality, and even though you can't smell them, the Serve can. Monitor your indoor air quality, change your set points, and configure the Serve to best suit your client's needs and lifestyle. The Serve is also manufactured right in Urbana, Illinois, entirely powered by 100% local solar energy. The Serve can work really well with heat pump water heaters such as the Rheem Prestige to boost its capacity or work with Radiant, or the Serve has been used in many green building projects that we've seen to distribute Mitsubishi mini split heat system air around the home or multifamily unit. And finally, the GeoBoost adds on features to sync the Serve to your client's GeoComfort geothermal system. Learn more at buildequinox.com. And then also a big thanks to our secondary sponsor, Niagara Conservation. They have the Stealth toilet at 0.8 gallons per flush to help mitigate the #1 water need in any home or multifamily building, which is toilets, single flush and ADA approved. Make sure to check out the Stealth toilet at niagaraconservation.com. All right, well, welcome everybody to the what to know about the International Green Construction Code, IgCC. This course is approved for 1 hour in continuing education units, GBCI, Certified Green Professional, AIBD, BPI, NonWholeHouse, as well as AIA, Health, Welfare, and Safety, HSW, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. Today I'll be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the executive director here at the nonprofit, the GreenHome Institute. The reality is that green codes are coming. They're going beyond energy conservation, which is kind of where we're at now, and getting into health, water, materials, place. And so this is happening, and it's happening through the IgCC program, so we want to keep talking about it. So I'm very excited to hand this off to our speakers here. First of all, we have Hope. Hope likes to show her shade of green and hopefully unveiling yours. She is an energy green code consultant for Colorado Code Consulting and plans examiner for the Cherry Hills Village, Colorado. Hope holds several ICC certifications that she utilizes as a plan analysis, inspector, and instructor. Hope is a governing committee member of the ICC Sustainability Membership Council, and she's a member of ICC SEHPCAC, Sustainability, Energy, and High Performance Code Action Committee. And then right after that, Hope is going to be handed off to Wes. Wes is a lead fellow as a director in the lead department of USGBC, and he has worked to align technical requirements from the USGBC's lead rating system to green building codes, including the Model International Green Construction Code and the new ASHRAE Standard 189.1, which I hope you all will give us a brief on how those two go together. He also directs the materials and resources activities for USGBC and manages the lead materials and resource technical advisory group. So at that point, I'm going to hand it off to our first speaker, Hope, and Hope, please take it away.
Let's get going here. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the National Green Building Standard actually works with and is connected to the International Green Construction Code, or the IgCC. Now, often in codes, you're going to find that there'll be references all throughout there where it'll state something similar to like Wind ventilation is in accordance with the International Mechanical Code. The relationship between the NGBS and the IgCC is quite different in that aspect, but it provides so many more options for certain projects that fall into this. So as Brett had mentioned, he was kind of hoping that we could discuss a little bit about the partnership between the IgCC. And what happened for the creation of the 2018 IgCC is that there used to be two options for you to go with as far as a standard and a code for green buildings or sustainable construction. And one was ASHRAE 189.1, and the second was ICC's International Green Construction Code. So, as you may be aware or are not aware, what they did is they created a partnership, and in that partnership came together, and so now we have the 2018 IgCC. And the new partnership created the 2018 IGC, but it's powered by content from 189.1. So the technical content that you find in the IGCC is overseen by the ASHRAE process, and the administrative portions of the code are overseen by the ICC process. And so this is how the two families kind of were blended together. And so now we have the 2018 IGCC that's powered by 189.1. So what are we finding within the 2018 IGCC? It still covers the site sustainability. It's a lot more than encompassing just what you find for energy, although that is part of what you find in there, but there are, you know, the designs of the irrigation and landscaping. It addresses what's inside the building, such as the types of materials that are used, guidance for operating and educating the occupant on how to operate the systems within this building. But what doesn't it cover? So the IGCC does not cover single-family houses or multifamily structures that are 3 stories or less. So these would be considered, you know, residential items. And by this, it's very similar to what you find with the Energy Code. The Energy Code states that you are considered a residential project if you're 3 stories or less. So it kind of translated over into the 2018 IGCC. So this is where the National Green Building Standard, or the NGBS, comes into, you know, quote unquote, save the day. The NGBS is designed to address residential projects, both for the multifamily and also dealing with the single family and duplexes. So let's kind of get into this a little bit, and let's talk about how the appendices work in the IGCC. So this setup that's in the IGCC is slightly different than what we use in the iCode family or what was previously used in the 2012 or the 2015 IGCC. ASHRAE differentiates their appendices by 2 categories. They utilize and informative. So with that, we need to discuss what are the differences between the two and how they work together in this new IGCC format. So first off, let's talk about how ASHRAE categorizes normative appendices. So these appendices are written in mandatory language, and these are considered part of the provisions of the ASHRAE standard, whichever standard it may be. But in this case, we're talking about for the code. So this would be provisions of the code. And if you go into the IGCC and in the normative appendices, you'll see a preface that says this is a normative appendix and is part of this code. Now, an informative appendices are not necessarily written in mandatory language. They're there to provide information, a little bit more guidance as far as how to address the topic that's involved in this appendices. And so it is not necessarily a part of the code, but just part of the information to be able to get you to where you need to go with it. Now let's discuss how ICC code dependencies work, because these appendices are written in mandatory code language, and it's very similar or mirrors what you would find within the body of the code, but they are not part of the code until they have been adopted by the jurisdiction. So if the jurisdiction decides to choose, out of the IRC, the radon mitigation appendices, that at that point would become part of the code. So that's how ICC addresses it. So now that we've discussed kind of how all three types of appendices work within the two organizations, now we need to discuss a little bit of how the appendices within the IgCC work. So while the appendices that are listed there say normative and informative, this is still part of the ICODES family and would require for those particular appendices to be adopted so that they can be implemented. So this is going to bring us to Appendix J, which is an option for residential compliance and utilizing the National Green Building Standard to address those particular projects that may not fall under the scoping of the IgCC. Now, this particular appendix is probably one of the smaller appendices that you're going to find within the ICODES family, but I think it has one of the largest impacts on a project. And in Appendix J, one will have the option that if it is adopted, of being able to utilize the National Green Building Standard for residential types of construction. And as it states here in this preface here, this appendix is utilized for the NGBS is a rating system to demonstrate performance for levels, demonstrating your green or sustainable construction. Now, the NGBS process is an ANSI-approved consensus process, and I have the privilege of participating in the process as a voting consensus committee member, vice chair of the water task group, and the chair of the new mixed-use chapter that will be coming in the 2020 edition of the NGBS. So it is still a consensus process, very similar to what you may find as far as, the ICC process, and somewhat similar to what you find in the ASHRAE process. All three of them have different processes, but they do have a core base to it that it is a consensus process. So we're going to jump in here and we're going to talk about what Appendix J actually states and how this is all going to work. So if you go to J101.1.1, it states that projects that are single family or two family or townhouses, their accessory structures and the building sites that they are located on that are 3 stories and less have the option of utilizing ICC ASHRAE 700, which is the NGBS, and it would be the 2015 edition. And you, like I said earlier, remember that the IGCC scoping does not apply to these types of projects. So if we're a jurisdiction and we're wanting to really be green and sustainable, we have to take a look at, how are we going to address those items that are not within the scoping of the IGCC. So this appendices allows for this to happen. So if we go to J101.1.2, it states that R3s comply with ICC 700 or NGBS. And I want to go over a little bit, just really, really briefly, as far as what is considered an R3 occupancy. And you're You would find this information in Chapter 3 of the IBC, but some of the items that would fall under here would be like care facilities that have 5 or fewer people, congregate living facilities that have 16 or fewer occupants that are non-transient, meaning that they're more of a permanent nature, boarding houses, congregate living facilities that are transient, meaning that, not necessarily in a permanent fixture, that are 10 or fewer. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what encompasses for an R3. So it's a similar residential type of occupancy, and so in this case, it's looked at as a residential item and could go under the ASHRAE ICC 700 and the NGBS. So J101.1.3 states that R2 and R3s shall comply with the NGBS when they are 3 stories or less, and that also includes your accessory structures and the building site. Again, this is very similar to what you would find in the International Energy Conservation Code, where there's that designation of 3 stories or less is considered that you would comply with the residential requirements, and projects that are 4 stories or above would comply with the commercial side of the requirements. So it's very similar, and things are set up within these 3 codes to be comparable. And so making this so that it fits with what's already going on within the energy code, it states 3 stories or less. So here is where things start to get interesting. An R2 and an R3, including their accessory structures and their building sites that are 4 stories or more, start to have an option. They can either use the requirements out of the IgCC, or they can use the NGBS. And the NGBS, while created for these residential projects, are also created to be utilized for multifamily. Within the NGBS, it will have items on there that state, you get so many points or you can utilize this, and then there'll be a section that states for multifamily to obtain these points, you would need to, do this, or it would be applicable in this sort of application. So the NGBS addresses the fact that multifamily is slightly different and recognizes, and they have a separate task group that just addresses the provisions that are found in the NGBS and figures out how to translate them into how it would work for multifamily. So this provides for any project, a great amount of flexibility for the designer. So we can talk a little bit about how some of this flexibility between the 2 books here shortly. I'll get into that a little bit later, but it does provide a great amount of flexibility. So this section makes a lot of sense, right? So the residential portion in a mixed-use building would have the option of complying with the IgCC or the NGBS. But the commercial portion of the mixed-use building would need to be utilizing the IgCC. So you might think it might make sense just to go under one book instead of in between the 2. And I could understand that, but there's a lot of items when you utilize the NGBS that, like I said, address multifamily very specifically and could be a benefit for someone going through that program. And then the other thing is if you go through the NGBS, you do get the recognition of what level of performance you were able to obtain with the the residential portion of the project. So that may be something that would be used as a marketing tool But of course, doing the entire building under the IgCC is not a bad thing either. I mean, then you're just looking at one particular product there. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, what's involved when it comes to the National Green Building Standard and what it is. It is a voluntary rating system. It is above code, which I would like to clarify. When we say above code, it's not necessarily just above the energy code. I know often that's what it's referenced to, is that it's an above energy code. And it's not. It encompasses so much more. I mean, we discussed a little bit of what is involved with that. But it is also an ANSI approved process. It is part of the iCode suites, which means that it works together with the requirements that you're going to find within the other iCodes. And for an example, in the energy code, in the IECC, there are items that are considered mandatory. Well, those items also translate over into the NGBS, and so they are also considered mandatory, meaning that because you have to do it by code, you don't get to take credit for it and gain points for it in going with the NGBS. They work together to make sure that there isn't any double dipping or free points that are awarded for that. It is also, the 2015 is also an ASHRAE standard. It does do residential use occupancies, and one of the great things for multifamily especially is the fact that there is no height limit for this. So you could have a 3-story multifamily apartment unit that you're putting in, or you could do 100 stories, and all of that would be able to comply through this standard. So like I said, this is a certification program that is overseen by the Home Innovation. They are the adopting entity for it. You are able to utilize verifiers, which is great. We'll discuss that a little bit further. Again, homes and multifamily, it's recognized by federal agencies when it comes to financing and so forth. And then it does have a certification, which I think allows a little bit of recognition for the efforts that you go through for this. Now, the scoping for the NGBS deals with residential occupancies, and with that, you can either have brand new construction, or it does address when you're doing renovations. Multifamily often will do renovations, and this gives the opportunity that you can demonstrate where you took your renovations and you were able to make them a more sustainable renovations. And then it also addresses assisted living. So again, like I stated, there are mandatory practices that have to come into compliance with this, and it's not just within the energy section. It also deals with other sections that have mandatory practices. And then you go with your voluntary points, where you're trying to gain so many points within these categories to reach the level that you would like to obtain. So with this particular demonstration, you can see where the points are to be able to obtain your bronze, your silver, your gold, your emerald. And these are the minimum points that you must gain within each of these categories. So let's say you get, 50 in your chapter 5, 43 and 6, 30 and 7, 25 and 8, and so forth. But in chapter 10, you receive 10 points. So you went above what would be required within the bronze level. But whatever your points are for your lowest set of points, so even if you had gotten silver everything and then only received 8 points for your chapter 10 and received a bronze level for that, your rating would be bronze. So that's just a real quick once over there. Chapter 5 deals with your lot, talking about, what you choose, your stormwater management, your landscape plan, which to me is very important, trees and vegetation, making sure you're putting the right stuff in where. And then Chapter 6 deals with your resources, the materials that are used, how much recycled content is there, your universal design. That encompasses items like accessibility. Do you have a zero entry? Are your handles levers for your sinks and your faucets and so forth? Chapter 7 addresses the energy efficiency compliance, and with that you have 4 options: your prescriptive, your performance, Energy Star, and HERS index path, which is very similar to the ERI path. And then one that is true to my heart, which is Chapter 8, your water efficiency. So it not only talks about the fixtures and their flow rates, such as your shower heads, your faucets, toilets, and what have you. It goes beyond that. It talks about, you know, some alternative water sources like rainwater collection, reclaimed gray water and recycled water, where you can use that, how that's being used. I mean, there's a builder in Texas right now that is doing zero energy homes and zero rainwater, and he does utilize, and he is a part of the NGBS community. Chapter 9 talks about your indoor environmental quality, you know, VOCs, that was discussed a little bit earlier, your ventilation, radon, you know, just a few items going on there. You know, how do you address, you know, trying to keep dust and debris control within while you're constructing the project? I mean, you know, ductwork collects things. It's a Velcro. And then you got Chapter 10, because you've gone through all of these items to create this system that works together. Now you have to educate the person that's going to utilize these systems, and so that they're using them properly and how they were designed and intended to be. So that's just a quick overview of that. Now, the NGBS process is a third-party process, meaning that you would have a third-party verifier that would go out and verify that the items that you placed and you presented that you wanted credit for, they would go out and verify that these were the actual items that were installed. And so how does that help? Well, that does help building departments, especially building departments that may be overburdened right now. They're able to get the sustainability and the green that their community is wanting, while having somebody else be able to address that and take care of that for them. So it does provide a very nice option, and it doesn't add additional work for building departments other than collecting that certificate that says, yes, we have gone through the process and here we are, and here's our certificate, we're at this level, blah, blah, blah. And then that way they can document it and put it into their particular permanent records. So how it works is you're going to design what you want, right? You're going to pick and choose. You go through, you decide, I want to do this, I don't want to do this, I'm going to do this. You fill everything out, you have it all ready to go, then you register. And when you register, you provide all that information, you get your verifier, everything's set up, and then you do your construction. And so then the verifier goes out and takes a look, does what they need to do. They submit all the information and verification to the adopting entity, which is Home Innovations, and they go through, verify that everything's there, and they provide you with the National Green Building Standards certification. Now, as I alluded to earlier, there are some great financial incentives to utilizing this program. Some national programs or financial programs will give you percentages off, reduction in certain aspects. Some will provide you with rebates if you go through this program. I know here in Colorado, we have a multifamily, low-income financial process that they go through, and the NGBS is a recognized entity. If you go through this project, you are deemed to comply with it and you can receive the green loans. So there is some financial incentives when you go with some of these programs. And I would like to just say thank you, and I hope I was able to provide a little bit of information for you on one of the shortest appendices within the ICODES family and how we all work together as a family.